And welcome back to PSA TV. I am Christy Singh. Welcome back to the second half of your post-budget analysis. To my right, I've got the political leader of the PEP, Mr. Phillip Alexander. Good morning and welcome.
Hi, Christy. Thank you for having me.
And to his right, I have Mr. Warren Anderson, who has corrected me, of course. He is the Guild representative for the evening and part-time students. Good morning and welcome to PSA TV.
Good morning to you, Christy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Always a pleasure having you. And to my left, I have Mrs. Carolyn C. Prasad-Bechan, a woman of many portfolios, the political leader of the Congress of the People. She's also a former Minister of Energy. Anything am I missing?
Public administration.
Public administration, of course. Good morning and welcome to
Good morning to you, Christy, and a special good morning to your viewers.
And we have, joining us back, we have Mr. Mariano Brown. How did it feel for that 2-second break? You got a 2-second break to
Good
go
morning.
I'm going to start with you, of course.
Seriously?
Yes. Your thoughts on yesterday's budget presentation, a 3-hour and 20 minutes long budget presentation done there by the finance minister. It's the final budget presentation from this administration. Your thoughts on the budget itself. We're keeping it sanitized, of course.
Yeah. I hear people referring to it as a feel-good budget.
I heard it's a sweetheart budget too.
No, but it is a feel-good budget at the end of your term as a government. And you are handing out handouts to 20% of the working population minimum wage. How does this feel good? If 20% of the adult population of the country have their names on a list for a no-frills HDC house, how is any of this anything to feel good about? The economy of Trinidad and Tobago is on the rocks, has been on the rocks for about 57 years, interrupted a few times by a couple booms. We took those booms with governments that should not have been trusted to run parlors and squandered it, giving friends financial lifestyles of the rich and the famous, while the rest of the country stuck. And looking at what passes for social development and management, because I find this is absent from every budget. And yet, the whole purpose of government is the well-being of each and every citizen. Without the citizenry, there's no purpose for government. Government's job is to protect the citizenry, steward the economy to the benefit of the citizenry. What about this that took place yesterday in that parliament was there didn't feel good about? Bulbs? Colm Edward looked like a fool. He sounded like a clown. And to the masses who've been kept in poverty and subjugation for 57 years, boom come and boom gone, to give them 30 cents US extra an hour and tell them to feel good about that is an insult to the people, an insult to the parliament, and an insult to the nation. I give this government a failing grade. And yesterday, that was the exclamation point.
I see my friend here, Mr. Anderson. I see you nodding in agreement here.
Not necessarily agreement, just waiting my turn. I guess it's my turn to weigh in on the budget, and of course I'll bring a general student perspective coming from the UE. What is of particular interest to me, and I heard the panel discussing transformation before, right? And we, in order to transform from something to go to something else, right? We know that we have been established as a rentier economy based on oil and gas, right? And now the question is, where do we move to?
Yeah.
What is the legacy of the country? And I have not seen in the budget or heard anywhere else the reliance on what I view as the great equalizer, technology.
Oh, very
The
important.
smallest country in the world could be compared to the largest country by developments in innovation where it comes to technology. All the other industries can be bolstered by the use of technology. Right, and right inside of UWI, I'm very proud to be a UWI student because I know right now we've been sending students to China as a part of software development programs. And I'm very hopeful that these students are going to come back and lead the charge in terms of technological development in not just the country, but the region, right? And what we need to see flowing out of that, of course, is the development of e-commerce in the country, because we have a lot of innovations, a lot of bright minds, and we are talking export, but when it comes to getting the money digitally, we have an underdeveloped e-commerce sector, and we cannot get what is due to us. We have the intelligence, we are producing, right? But we have young, bright minds very frustrated about their talents not being able to meet what they know is due to them. So that's where I'll be looking at where this budget is concerned. I'll weigh in on other items as the time goes along.
Mrs. Sipasad, I know this would have been one of your fields. Just piggybacking on his point, e-commerce coming under your tenure as former Minister of Public Administration. So tell me,
Let me just first of all say special good morning to everyone. Let me start by saying that, we've been hearing now this whole issue about transforming the economy or modernizing or creating new sectors of the economy. I think the problem I've heard over the last 4 years, 5 years, and now in this budget is the lack of implementation. We have had a situation where I think we do not focus enough on the reform that is required to take us where we want to go. If you want change to take place, then you have to be focused on your reform programs. And I can give you several examples. I could start with the public service. As you talk about technology, technology was not just there when we were in the People's Partnership. It started from even before. We had a government-to-government arrangement with Singapore, where we were developing the government backbone. The last thing I knew that we were trying to implement was the unique identifier. So when we come now and we talk about life certificates, like if it is a great accomplishment, it is not. Life certificates, that whole initiative started under a Joint Select Committee in 2012, 2013, and was supposed to have been implemented there. We have the electronic funds transfer. The regulations for that were passed in 2015 so that we could have online e-payments for public services, so we prevent all these amount of people having to come to Port of Spain to pay something, to pay their taxes. We started off that for the purpose of what we say online taxes. So my concern is the length of time that we take, and we have to understand that we are not here as 5-year, we have 5-year projects. When we were looking at the public service transformation project, that was a 10-year project. But when one government goes out and another government comes in, everything shuts down. There is just no continuity. You talk about the ease of doing business. Ease of doing business is not just a ranking. Ease of doing business speaks to the areas that we have to change and we have to reform and the structural changes that must be made. But the problem with that as well is when we start it, it stops. And we have not, when we fall in this ranking every time and become uncompetitive, it is not just because we're not trying. We're doing it, but because of that start and stop, we decelerate. And other countries are moving faster. This is about pace. Other countries are moving at a faster pace than we are moving as Trinidad and Tobago, and we continue to fall behind. And the list could go on. I could talk about the police service of Trinidad and Tobago. I hear about more budgets, and it is always the largest budgetary allocation. Why? And how come we still not see the impact? It is because we are not taking time to reform the police service of Trinidad and all the law enforcement agencies, restructure it. There are many people, like you have said, gate and everything else that the taxpayers have paid for. So much investments have gone into training and qualifications. You know it as a student, and these people cannot get jobs. If you go to the police service of Trinidad and Tobago, I had an incident recently, and when I was there, I was amazed that when we checked every police officer in that police station, each of them availed themselves to a degree, whether it's in criminology, software engineering. Why aren't these people being deployed and in positions where they could now make that contribution towards intelligence-led policing, to make it part of the whole organization? So my concern is, and I will continue to say this, is we do not want to spend time in reform, in making change and transformation, and sticking to that implementation plan as we go forward.
You're using a big term there, change. And I think where we talk about change, you need to identify a problem first. And is it that we have a problem in this country where we fail to acknowledge where we're going wrong, so that now we can make step toward changing?
Well, I think that's one of the problems we have, period. Petrotrin is a specific example of that. Instead of us trying to understand what the problems were and where the errors were, yeah, there were many. But there were many, many recommendations and solutions paid for through consultants to tell us how to correct them. But you know what? We didn't want to acknowledge it. And what we did is we say, you know what? Let's hoodwink the nation. Shut down everything, open up new companies, give them new names, and the problem will disappear. Did the problems disappear? No, they didn't. And as much as we talk about heritage and Paria, all the things we said that, you know, the problems that were in Petrotrin as an integrated operation have now found its way into Paria and into heritage. So we will continue along those lines. It happened many years ago. We could take BB Caribbean Airlines, we shut down one. We carry over all the problems of BB into Caribbean Airlines. Nothing solved. Because we do not as a people want to acknowledge where the errors are, where the mistakes are, what are the problems, and find real solutions to the problems. We formulate all kinds of hypothetical solutions, sometimes because of politics, and that may not be. So we're not formulating the problem accurately because we want to play politics.
I see Mr. Brown is smiling there.
Well, there's very little to disagree with in some of the points that were made there, and we'll keep making the same error. Part of the difficulty that Trinidad has suffered from in the post-1986 period is that we've been changing governments with a certain degree of irregularity, as a result of which that they have lacked the continuity of effort in terms of finishing things. That's one. And secondly, we haven't determined what performance measures are. And we keep, and that's interesting because the point that Mrs. Supasad Bechan was making has to do with solutions, but also about performance measures. What have we done, and is it appropriate to the task? And when do we have, and should we change? Exactly. Those are the other kinds of questions that have to be asked as well. So that part of the issue is that the administrations have been, in a sense, too short in terms of getting the job done. And we've not been sufficiently proactive in terms of moving forward. And we've also come up with what you would call, in other words, to fit the solution to that time frame, we call them a solution. So essentially, for example, we take NHA and we make it HDC. But we just move NHA across into HDC and we change the name.
Anything change?
Pay for a little paint, put in a new building, and we expect things to change, but it can't.
Mr. Brown, I was wondering if I could ask you one question.
Yes.
Because we're talking about these things in ways that the average person not grasping. And I find the discussion becomes political.
Because they're hard.
Good, no problem, they're hard, right? And I find that the discussion becomes political quickly. It becomes a contest
I haven't gone to politics at all.
I just want to ask you a question. You are Minister of Finance, yes?
Yes.
I want you to explain to this nation why we still, to this day, spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year transporting prisoners from jails to courts when we've known for over 2 decades that the cheapest, easiest way to get justice on time is to build the courts inside or adjacent to the jails. Have you ever sat in a cabinet where it was discussed?
I've sat in a cabinet where the cost of the contract was discussed, and it was easier to award the contract than it was to agree to building the jails.
Building courts?
Building the courts next to the jails.
Could you explain why? Why is it easier to give a contract that causes so much inconvenience, costs 10 times per year what a one-time
Yeah, but I can explain that very easily. And it has nothing to do, and I know where you are going with that.
I'm going everywhere.
Right, and I'm going to make this particular point. I think the specific issues, and there are issues, have to do with setting out detailed plans and working in accordance with a coordinated plan across ministries. So that what is agreed with the Ministry of National Security is a contract for X. But the agreement with regard to building courts has to be with a different ministry, which also has to be integrated with another one. So what the problem really comes from a lack of integrated management focus in terms of solving.
Failure of cabinet to communicate. Simple ideas.
Not even a failure of cabinet to communicate. If the ministries are not communicating, right, the ministers are not going to be able to communicate.
This point
So the issue has to do with the interministerial format. So I'll give you a very specific instance, right, and not something very specific. Following through from the point that Mrs. Carolyn Supersad Beecham was making with regard to deployment and working with Singapore. TT BizLink is really the Ministry of Trade. I'm a Minister of Trade, and we have to give approvals. But approvals for certain things require approval that comes from the Ministry of Health, also requires approval that comes from the Ministry of Agriculture, and also requires approval which comes from the Ministry of National Security before I could give a permit. I am giving a permit, right? But I need to consult with these people for this to happen. So we have to put in a system to be able to do that. And it also has implications because the item is coming across the water. So it's not only national security, it also now has a revenue implications, customs.
But Mr. Brown,
And let me finish the example.
but I want you to keep it simple.
I'm
Just for
keeping
the
it,
viewers.
no, because it's not simple.
But it should be, and it's unnecessarily
I'm saying to you
I think
that
it's
the issue
simple as
is one of coordination across ministries. So that we get 3 ministries to agree on a software system, but one ministry, which happens to be the Ministry of Finance, and I am the minister in the Ministry of Finance, customs have a different opinion, and the Minister of Finance sides with customs. So guess what? We put in a partial solution that solves for 3 of the 4 problems.
You don't mind keeping
The
it
4th problem
focused
is working.
on this issue.
But
This issue is important.
The issue
because it
is
makes
the
a point.
same issue.
No, I can extrapolate
Is
this
one-
issue to Petrotrade.
The issue is one of coordination. The
But
issue
Mr.
is one of
but Mr.
coordination.
Brown, we pay very large salaries to government ministers who all function as a face of a prime minister. You're trying to say to me that we've never had a prime minister that could have sat in the room and said, John, work with Mary and Charlie so that we could build the courts outside the jail and save us the $500 million we've spent running people off the roads with amalgamated security trucks for the past 20 years.
I think, just to clarify what he's saying, is it that you're saying that approval is where it comes in, where you can't just
No, I'm saying
put
coordinating
something-
the approvals
coordinating
across
Right,
ministries
so approvals and coordinated approvals.
to solve it. Every ministry has a priority.
Yeah.
So my priority, I'm under pressure. I'm under pressure, the crime rate is going. I want to get people to court. I want to do X, Y, and Z. All right, I want to coordinate this with doing X, Y, and Z. And another ministry says, but that will take too long. So I want to solve this problem now. So we solve for part of the problem, which doesn't give us a full solution. So we get an expensive partial solution.
And that is the issue that we have dealt with in the public service reform program when we were trying to do from the coal to diamond. It was about how we integrate across the board because the ministries operate in such silos. This is why even I think I was on your program when we talk about development going forward, we don't want this silo approach. And in fact, we were moving towards where the face of government, there would not have been these ministries, but it would have been services. So let's say, for example, prisoners is a service. And what are all the areas and all the ministries that have to support that service to make it happen? Because yes, I will come back to your $600 million project service, the amalgamated you're talking about, sorry.
Service cost.
Prisoner service, you talk transportation. Yes, there have been several attempts to build courts, but again, too, you have to have the agreement from the judiciary. It has to go through the judiciary for approval. It has to be outfitted accordingly. That never got off the ground. The second thing,
Let me answer that. Let's take it one by one, right? There should be systems and protocols that are easy to copy from the entire Commonwealth. A court is a court is a court.
You know, actually, the interesting thing about
Mr.
it,
Brown,
with the exception of 3
John, I
countries
wanna
across the
answer
region. No, I'm answering you.
But I want to answer something she just said. And then
Right?
I'll see what
I want to answer that question because you're saying across the entire Commonwealth. The entire Commonwealth is not consistent.
But a court is a
Australia,
The Prime Minister is moving the Parliament from the waterfront and turning the waterfront into a court.
Mr.
It just now
Alexander,
wait.
hang on a second. We're not on a political platform
No,
yet.
Mr. Mariano
So
Brown.
why
All
are we
right.
having
Okay,
this
okay.
antagonistic
Okay,
approach?
okay, Mr. Alexander. Okay, all right. You were saying, Mr. Brown?
I was just saying that the issue is one of coordination, and I'm going to make the point that Australia, Canada, Singapore, New Zealand are probably the gold standard in terms of coordinating along those lines.
That's right.
But you have the same problem across all the other countries in the Commonwealth.
Exactly.
So then our answer to us not being able to solve, because I remember when the contract was awarded, we had green prison trucks. And I remember the Secretary General of the Prison Officers Association said they weren't consulted on the amalgamated contract. They didn't need it, and it came like a thief in the night. How is it possible that when financiers or friends of the government want to get stuff done, all of these obstacles that you and Mr. Brown spoke about don't get in their way?
You know, I want to say to you, I'm sure that there are issues with regard to friends and financiers, and that there's some element of that in this. But you ask about a wider issue, and you want to move it into one specific area, one specific contract. If you have a problem with the amalgamated security, and if you want, and the fact that it has been consistently able to do X, Y, and Z, then you also have to ask the question about a whole other series of areas. Now, I want to make the point to you that government has taken a position with regard to some time. Before, they used to have, the Ministry of Works and Transport used to have all of its equipment painted grey, correct?
Yes.
Right. They used to have equipment so that the Ministry of Transport used to go and clear on the North Coast because it had its own equipment. The bottom line, a decision was taken quite some time ago with regard to some of these organizations that they would not do it in-house. Right? Same thing with regard to HDC.
Wait, why?
NHA used to do because it was meant to be inefficient.
Christmas tree, and you're not explaining why.
Because you're moving down one area
No, but I
and
want to
I'm
ask
giving
you,
you a
you make a
problem.
statement to my point. Just say why.
I just answered you.
No, you said a
I
decision was
answered
made,
you.
and
A
I thought
decision was
why.
made across
Why?
several different administrations.
Why?
That it would be done by the private sector, as distinct from it would be done by the public sector.
Why? Was
Right?
it more expedient? Would it save us
Because
money?
it was meant to save money because they were supposed to do it faster
Faster,
because they had more
quicker.
equipment. They were meant to be more efficient.
So CPEP saves us money.
I never said, see, you know, we're moving all over the road,
Yeah.
all
Just
over the place.
CPEP coming.
You may have certain specific problems. You asked me about a specific answer, I answered you.
Okay, I think
CPEP,
we're speaking
URP,
specifically here
the
to...
public, what you call it?
Trinidad and Tobago, and I know this for a
I don't know
fact.
about the public of Trinidad and Tobago, I know about you right now.
Mr.
Are raising an
I-
issue, you
Mr.
have a
Brown,
problem with a
I
particular
hear you
contract,
always.
and you want to make me
Every time I
responsible for
speak
it.
politically,
I'm not about it.
Absolutely, I get that. But every time I speak politically, I am not the normal run-of-the-mill politician. I speak on behalf of 1.4 million people. I will ask questions that they're trying to ask all these years.
Well, how would that make
I
you
have
different from any
I have
other
given them-
politician?
okay, let's ask this. Let's ask this question then. Let's switch gears. Because people want to have actual answers, not vague stuff. They want to know, how did it work out this way? How did Petrotrend, this PNM government, decide?
I can't answer that, I can't answer
Okay.
that at all.
So you can't answer. Let's ask this.
No, I can't answer it. You have to ask the minister. When you get to see the minister, you ask him. 'Cause I think we've asked a number of questions along those lines
Exactly.
too. So you ask him.
All
But
right.
as somebody who's had office as a minister of finance, Christy, I'll stop right now.
I cannot speak to the specifics of contract
How
A
contracts are
or
awarded.
contracts by B on the basis of that. I can tell you what the methodology is, and I can tell you what the general problem is. I can't answer you for
To
specific
the public,
reasons.
what Carolyn said about the people seeing things start under one government and stop and we decelerate, to the average person looking on, the Point 14 highway was not about whether the partnership was doing it better or the PNM was doing it better, but who could get contracts for kickbacks when a different government changes. We've witnessed trillions of dollars in this country evaporate. We have nothing to show for it. If you were to do an assessment of all of Trinidad and Tobago for all the booms we've ever had,
Trinidad and Tobago's never earned trillions.
we've never earned trillions.
No.
How much we spend?
Billions, but not trillions. We've not reached trillions.
We've not
Billions
reached
is a
trillions.
new feature. Billions is the feature of the last 19 years.
In the past 10 years, Mr. Brown, how much money do we spend in budgets?
I think that's where you come in there. In the past 10 years, how many
How much money did we spend as budgets?
I don't know, you didn't add it up? Certainly, I'm sure it's not a trillion.
I know, but I'm hearing 60 billion a year.
I'm sure, no,
So
it says 60 billion a year for 4 years.
No, but the
That's
entire.
240 billion.
But he said that the UNC People's Partnership government went and reached as high as $64 billion. He said.
Hold on,
All
what was the purpose of this conversation?
just to
today again?
see. You said we didn't have. We didn't
I
spend a
think
trillion.
we're going down a political route here.
It's not that.
And that is
If you're gonna have people come to talk to the public about the budget, the public wants to know what gets into the conversation at government level to frame
Of
the
course, but I
just want to say this, to frame the conversation that single-use plastics are a problem.
right.
And styrofoam. But 80% of all the problems causing degradation to the environment is this. And Blue Waters and Coca-Cola and Solo and Essentially and Water One Not this morning scrambling to find replacement technology to that.
Okay.
So the average person is so tuned out of politics in Trinidad and Tobago because they're tired of the nonsense and the doublespeak. Trinidadians are not stupid people. They're just fed up of listening to politicians say what they need to say to justify a position. If you could, at the stroke of a pen, ban Styrotex, why you can't ban this? We've advocated put a 25-cent tax on that at the import or the manufacture stage to pay the indigent, the homeless, the unemployable, to pick the economy, the country clean, and at least start something while you're having a situation about dealing with these bottles. If the Minister of Finance brings this up in the budget and then turns a sharp corner and says, we will now ban Styrotex, like Styrotex is the problem, the average person looking on wants to know, how does that become our budget? How does that become how the country is run?
All right, let me ask you something. As an aspiring prime minister yourself, you're the leader of a political party. What would you have done, or what would you have done differently to make this economy grow? We've heard a lot of talk about diversification. We've heard, now this is not a campaigning
No, it's not a
exercise,
campaign,
but
You
know.
are the only people who refer to the fact that I'm a political party or politicians are wrong on you. I still talking as a
no,
citizen.
it goes
I was
without
here-
saying.
I
You
was here
are the
sitting-
political leader
I was
of a
sitting down here, I
party.
listened to Mr. Brown say that we have a room stock of a certain amount of rooms, and there are about 3-star rooms at hotels at best. Mr. Brown, how long ago were you the Minister of Finance?
About 10 years ago.
10 years ago. And in 10 years, I listened to that budget yesterday that said it took 27 years for them to complete the Fisheries Law. 5-year Fisheries Act. 5 years they're working at completing the procurement legislation that took the People's Partnership 5 years and 6 months to draft. That's 10 years and 6 months. The public is looking on and seeing that. You asked me what I would do differently. Mr. Brown said that
In
there are-
1971, the decision was made to change from land and building taxes
I
to
will
property tax.
tolerate your cross if you will tolerate mine.
1971.
And I don't mind the conversation going that way because I was in the middle of saying something interesting. Mr. Brown said we don't have enough room stock or quality rooms to get into diversified economy into tourism. And that may very well be a fact. But where is the vision that says, okay, we will be in tourism in 5 years, and until we have the room stock, let's deal with cruise ship tourism and other backpack tourism and whatever you could get to at least start the ball rolling. We do nothing. Coming out of this budget, again, like every other budget, every other Minister of Finance in this country's history has read from the same playbook. Right now we have this money, we have these debts, this recurring expenditure, and we want to build this.
So what do you propose we do different?
At the very least, involve the population in the system that's supposed to involve them. Trinidadians leave Trinidad and go all over the world and do so very well. Yet in Trinidad, we are expecting our people to continue to take handouts and subsistence and accept that as leadership in a country that people parrot all the time, that we are the third wealthiest in the Western Hemisphere. How does that add up to the average person waking up this morning? You had UWI people, you're a UWI guy here. How does that add up to them in a country, India, 30 years ago? 30 years ago in India decided they were getting into information systems and information technology. India now has the largest middle class in the world built on that. We have no vision for this country and we have to stop running it like a parlor. We have 2 kiss cake, 4 pack of cool man about water, we sell it that today. We can't continue to be so. The people are looking for leadership from the government. Shipping. Look to Singapore, look to Dubai. Take examples. Mr. Brown referred to Singapore. Singapore is half the size of Trinidad and Tobago. They have 5 times the population. Their GDP is 4 times ours. How? They don't have oil, they don't have gas, they don't have a nylon pool, they don't have a pitch lake. What they're doing right. And why we can't go and get Lee Kuan Yew or somebody like him to run this country then? And that's my point. And to the people looking on, yeah, I know he died, Mr. Brown. I know he died. But to the people looking on, and this is not personal, you know, I know you think you're taking it like it's personal. But the point that I'm trying to make is time that the people of Trinidad and Tobago got government to be functional. Because at this point, government not helping the people of Trinidad and Tobago. At best, they're causing stress that we need to resolve.
Let's zero in quickly on some of the measures implemented on the budget, not implemented rather, but listed in the budget. I'm going to start with you. What has been the talk of the country so far is the increase in minimum wage from $15 to $17.50. Now, yesterday, we would have seen where the opposition leader, she said that the minimum wage should be at least $20 per hour. Do you agree?
Well, I'm not sure how much impact all of this will make. Because if you look at it right now, there are so many people jobless.
Yeah.
So to tell me about minimum wage is another issue. And the other problem you have is sometimes you have now to be careful that the private sector who is struggling and hiring someone and say, okay, you see that increase in minimum wage, let me get rid of more people. Because the bottom line is, and this is why I want to come back, and I just want to touch on it to finish off the point that we started earlier. When we are talking about reform and implementation, it takes planning.
Yeah.
It is not a simple ad hoc response, and I disagree with Mr. Alexander where that is concerned. It is not a knee-jerk reaction. And we tend to do that in this country.
But I didn't say it was knee-jerk.
No, hold on.
But you're saying, and I'm asking you, how much time does it then take? How much time?
Because...
Give us an example. To decide to put courts outside the jail that would save us $100 million a year and save us all the...
If you do
how
not
much time that plan will take?
If you do not have continuity, you see, because I've heard this comment as well several times. It may take more than 5 years.
To plan
and that, not just to plan, just to implement it.
To plan
and if
something
another
as simple
government
as that,
comes
why?
in and decides, you know, it's not my project, so I'm not going to continue it. Because I have to own something to be able to get my
why
political
would it take
power.
so long?
To do what?
To plan to build
You
four
have
courtrooms.
to build courtrooms, or are you building court
If you
complex,
talk to the
court
president
complex?
of the... You don't need a court complex. What you need is a magistrate's court outside the jails. The president
doesn't
of the
work that
Prison
way.
Officers
Doesn't
Association
work so.
said that there is a courtroom under construction in the jail 10 years now.
And I will tell you, there was also a facility to put video conferencing right here.
10 years now.
No, during our time.
10 years.
Right? Okay, so it's 10 years now, you're saying? I don't know. We started a project for video conferencing. We started it.
So the planning was done. We were at the building stage.
We did a whole project for what we call the electronic bracelet, where you will have a whole program. I remember as Minister of Public Administration approving the positions, the qualified people, and sending them to train on it, because training could take time.
Right.
If you take the forensic center, for example, you have to send people to train. That would take
3 months training to put on a bracelet.
It's 3 months to put on, but 3 months what? To train someone?
I watched the Minister of National Security
Listen,
under Gary
Mr.
Griffith
Alexander,
create a national
hold on.
operations center
Hold
that
on.
was able to monitor the whole country.
And I want to tell you, I want to caution. Sometimes we have to be careful we don't hoodwink this nation into believing that things are so simple that we get up tomorrow morning and fix it.
Okay,
That
but
is
they're not this difficult.
that is exactly the problem we run into in this country. Everybody gets up and say, hey, let me take off that roof and do it over. I'm not realizing that I have to fix the building as well.
More than 5 years.
So what I'm trying to
take
say,
off the roof and fix the building.
what I'm saying is, when you have a plan and you come up with a proper plan, we have to stick to the plan. Over time, the plan will change because circumstances change. Fine, there's a process for that. But these are things I know, Mr. Alexander, you don't want to appreciate. You feel that by touting out all these words and that this could happen overnight,
No, not that, you know.
it
But I
doesn't
want to
happen
pin
that
former
way.
ministers
Okay?
down to explain their track records. You are telling Trinidad and Tobago who are watching you now
Yes.
that it takes 5 years to plan and 5 years to build something as simple as a courtroom?
It took how long to retrofit the Medina building in San Fernando for the magistrate court? Do you recall?
What is that about?
How long did it take the Chaguanas magistrate court to be
all of our plans
go through the process?
with things that failed?
And you see, that is why I come back to the point that when you look at the gist of the problem is if we do not modernize the processes and systems in the public service, this is why we have that length
So
of
the
time
public
to
service is the
implement.
problem?
Of course, and we have had different.
The PSA building.
Wait, hold on.
In the PSA building.
Of course,
And the public service is the problem,
the public service, not the public servants.
not the servants.
The public
service,
service,
the way it
because we are
operates.
not
And
modern.
who, the government or
Let
the
me
service
finish.
is responsible?
Well, let me finish. I was there. You have to transform the entire structure, which is what we did. We came up with a new architecture. You have to come up with new job
long that took?
specifications.
How long that took?
It took 2 to 3 years.
And it was rolled out.
Right? And we started rolling it out. It has stopped. You now have to take those job specifications and come here to the PSA, sit, discuss it, agree to it, send it over to the CPO for it to be approved. Then now go to the Public Service Commission to start hiring in those positions. The Public Service of Trinidad and Tobago, again, like the police service, have a number of educated people, a number of people with the modern skill sets we need to, let me finish, to implement. But you know what? We don't have the jobs for them because we are dealing with old jobs and old job specifications. So when you're talking about modernization, let me explain to you. It's not only the jobs,
Carolyn,
it's the
explain to
structure.
me, explain to the public who watch
Yes.
Napa, Sapa, Taruba, the Cover Hospital. They have watched things materialize out of thin air when governments wanted it, and yet when governments
Because it's always easy. It's always easy to structure something, to build something. It's always easy to award a contract to build a highway. Do you realize? Do you
who can
realize?
solve all the problems that governments have failed to let them solve all these years?
And that's why the private sector, that is why you started that whole issue. This is why we started going into a partnership with the private sector to solve those same problems so that they could implement. It has been recognized that governments need to be more a facilitator, which, Mr. Alexander, is what we are proposing going forward. I think this country wants to know what is the solution going forward. We are fed up of all the back talk about what has happened in the past. Let's talk to the future. That's where we need to go.
I think more than
and how we
anything, the
define that
country
new
wants
future.
politicians and office holders to stop hoodwinking them. Start standing by what they say. If you come to the parliament with a policy to implement, tell them, we've taken care of the planning stages, that took 2 years. For the next 3 years,
And
we
that
need to
is
spend
why
100.
we are proposing that the plan should be owned by the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago and not the Cabinet. And the Cabinet accounts to the Parliament. But I'm coming back to what you were saying, Chrissy, back to the question of the whole issue of these wages. I don't have a problem. I know we want to get our balanced budget. I have no problem with borrowings. Once those borrowings
We've seen
are
Jamaica
tied
borrowed recently.
to revenue generations, means therefore I should not just be borrowing money because I want to construct a highway, because I'm not sure where the returns are going to come from that in terms to pay back that borrowing. Why are we not transforming enough? And I'm going to come back to this, because if we are talking about, and by the way, I have a problem with this $3 that we have estimated for as revenue for gas and the $60. I think a more conservative approach would have been $2.50. I don't know, Mr. Brown, if you agree with that, and probably more $55. I can't see where this is going, because we're going to run into the risk that what we have estimated for revenue, we may not even realize, and we could end up with a wider deficit and have to further cut expenditure. When I look at the budget yesterday, I am seeing a lot of a lot of the initiatives have a lot to do with, as again, increase the minimum wage, but not enough to say where is the CPEP contractor or the CPEP worker going forward.
Where does income come into your equation? You talk about deficit and you talk about expenditure. Why none of these political party-led governments ever talk to the people about ways to diversify our income away from 22 billion US? Why can't we grow this economy? Why can't we take steps that gives hope and opportunity to people?
And
Why
that's
are we
what we're
stuck
talking
in
about.
this-
I think that's
what
the
I'm trying to talk
conversation
about.
is here today, but I think
Exactly.
the direction the conversation has headed, it's kind of taken
yes,
away.
that's right.
I don't know,
from
Christine.
the-
Right? And I will give you an example.
And I didn't hear people talking about that.
We have
what I
been
heard people
talking
talking about
about-
is making excuses as to why we still are where we are.
No, we
Nobody
no,
in Trinidad and
we-
Tobago today knows what Trinidad and Tobago is or where it's trying to go.
Okay, so in your opinion, how do we go forward? Without looking back at what was done in the past, I mean, we can't be looking back continuously. It's something that all politicians do. They
Massive
come
steps,
and they
massive
tell you
steps to
this
diversify
government
the economy. Massive steps. If you're going to fail forward. Massive steps to diversify the economy and increase the
and
earning
this is the
capacity.
conversation that we need to have.
And we're still
We
talking
need to
oil and
tell-
gas in our global economy where the big players are trading away from oil and gas. Where's our conversation about all the different things we could do? People make jokes about pepper sauce. Go and see what Tabasco is worth in New Orleans and Louisiana. People make jokes about, we could do so many things. You want to trade away now from Styrotex. Sugarcane could have been used and bamboo on all this land and running idle that we're using to make strip malls and gas stations and cineplexes. We could be growing bamboo and sugarcane to make biodegradable food containers. I mean, I'm staying away from hemp. But I'm saying to you that there are ways and means that this thing could be done. Trinidadians are hearing expenditures that sounds like they're carved in stone. They're not. We could redo this country.
So you're saying we can curb expenditure.
I think the first step we need to go, honestly, right now, is to slash the way we do budgets. This way that the Minister of Finance comes and stands up and reads nonsense for 3 hours and 21 minutes. The Progressive Empowerment Party, I will mention my party's name now for this. You want revolutionary change? We say abolish the RHAs. The way the police service is set up. Abolish the local government system. Create a system called constituency boards of supervisors for all 41 constituency. Supervisors for education, healthcare, public health, public utilities, and national security to start. Give them a certain amount of autonomy. Come budget time, have each of those boards submit to the Minister of Finance the operating and development budget for that constituency for the next 12 months. And have each of those MPs in the parliament defend it. When the budget is done, the book shouldn't be so, it should be fat so. I should know Indigo Martin West that this $822 million has been allocated to do these specific things. And I could know that for the entire country. We have hospitals that we cannot operate. I could bring surgeons and doctors. All I need is the government that have them gagged and bound, because that's why you don't get information in the media, Governments come and gone have gagged public servants from being able to come and tell you what's really going on in central bank, what's really going on in healthcare and education. Because if they were given the freedom to talk, plenty former ministers would make a jail today.
And if we have a complete open government system with open data, then all of that becomes irrelevant. Because at the end of the day, citizens will always have. I just want to say, the issue of constituency funds have already been developed. Legislation was in place for that. I don't know if you recall, where they were looking at a development budget for every constituency.
Yes, I do remember.
What was the problem coming down the road when there was consultation on it was that how are we going to make sure that it is open and transparent where the procurement is
And I
concerned?
think it brings back to the point you were making, I don't know if it was you or Mr. Brown was making, about the fast pace in which governments are changed.
That's right.
And I don't know who it was made this point earlier, that you make plans for 5 years,
Yeah.
and then if you look at this budget, you make everything is touted to be done in 2020. Why, when we were in 2016, we didn't
do
see
some of
plans,
these issues?
some of these things
Yeah.
were done. And I don't want to go down a political road as much as you can't help but link it.
And
But
when
let's
a
let's
political
put
party reaches in government, it should cease its political roots. PNM government is the government of the whole country. NICWA and PNM is about to set up operation of an organization that PNM couldn't operate, but charge Trinidadians 13 billion for. We watch a government say that Petrotrin is going to destroy the economy, shut down Petrotrin, pay $2.3 billion in severance. Now the same government is saying Petrotrin could be feasible. Let the workers who were working there before run it. Okay, no problem. But what happened to the same $15 billion debt that you said was closing Petrotrin down? Where's that debt? And we sit and we listen to nonsense come out of ministers' mouths for decades. It is time that we hold all of them accountable. There should be a way for Faris Al-Rawi to be held accountable for the decision to discontinue that matter against Malcolm Jones et al. We have them disconnected so they could do what they want. Ministers come, ministers go. Carolyn is correct about one thing, There is no continuity. We play politics with everything. That has to stop. That has to stop. If you come into government and the last government, what they put in place is riddled with corruption, there should be a system in place to jail them. Jail them. Right size the project and take it forward if it's feasible. If it's not feasible, tell the public why and go after all those who were involved. We let things just go under the rug, We laugh and joke and share memes about Johnny O'Halloran and his buildings in Scarborough and Toronto. I know Carolyn and Mariano don't want to hear about that. But that is important to Trinidadians and Tobagonians who fall in the children's belly with mud this morning, who can't afford to think past this budget. $2,800 is a difference to $2,250 to a minimum wage earner. You just put the entire middle-class business-owning community on the line to pick up the tab for this government's foolish political budget. They are not going to have to fire people. That's what's going to happen. So this budget is not putting money in poor people's pocket. It's taking food out of their mouth.
Warren,
Hi.
you look amused right now.
I am actually. I feel like I don't have a horse in the race, but as a citizen, I do. If I could just tie the conversation back to transformation, because in my view, the 5-year problem will always plague us unless one constitutional reform, but I wouldn't go there. I want to stick to my perspective as a student and how we are affected upon graduation. And well, I see that there was an allocation increase to the OJT program, etc. But the problems that exist within the OJT program, where you have graduates, bright, young, coming out and being made to serve
And still
tea and
unemployed.
coffee, and yeah, we need to fix things like this. But it's my humble view that we need to move away from the value-based decision making and simply what looks to me as a student as poking in the dark. I think I could agree with the fact that we're moving away from the oil and gas rentier economy, and we need to replace that. To the credit of administrations that have come and gone, there has been some injection into the creative industries, and I think that the creative industries will be the basis for this transformation that we are looking for. Everything else will be hinged on that. That's what we have to offer the most as a small island developing state. And of course, once it's based around the ecology, because again, as a small island developing state, we have to put ecology first as the basis of all that we do. No island, no economy, right? And we'll have nothing to develop. So we need to, in order to move away from this, because I see the conversation going back and forth in the tete-a-tete, we need to apply the use of big data.
That's right, yeah.
Data must be applied on it. Without that, it's a sort of guesswork, right? This kind of guesswork, and then you have guesswork A being compared to guesswork B, and it's just a back and forth because whoever could debate their guesswork the best comes out on top. And the equalizer for that, from where I sit, is the data. What does the data say? Where do we go forward? We can't be guessing because look, the data is guiding us here, and maybe the data would say to us that multi-$100 billion economy like the creative $1 million industry like the creative industry is not the way to go. So we need to put our resources elsewhere, but we can't make decisions like that unless we capture the data that would allow us to analyze ourselves internally, but also compare ourselves on an appropriate scale to other nations, to the region and other nations.
So that is why That is why we're talking about policies.
Yes.
Our policies now must be evidence-based,
Definitely.
based on data, and this is why we're talking about opening up the data sets
Agreed.
publicly so that the population can participate, citizens can participate in some of the policy formulations. So when we are talking about, even in terms of how we measure it as well, how, the monitoring and evaluation is more data to tell you if your policy, what is the progress or what has been the success of your policy positions. And I think you're quite right in the sense that we sometimes, because we are not objective enough, and
Yes.
we take decisions because of the way we see it, not necessarily that it was based on evidence and data.
Correct.
And we need to divorce from that. So it cannot be that politicians taking the decisions only, or the political directorate. And this is the function of a public service. A public service is supposed to get involved in proper policy formulation based on the data and evidence, and then based on that, being able to monitor and evaluate its progress to determine where it needs to shift in order to get your maximum value.
Christy,
So that's a
I'd like
whole
to add to
process.
that. I'd like to add to that, Christy.
Just now, when she's finished, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is why we say that this is when we reshape and reform the public service, we would be able to achieve that, because those are the systems and processes and tools that you want to give your public officers to be able to operate within, even in terms of how the public officer offers a service. That service is because that public officer can monitor it and continuously on an everyday basis revise that policy in order to maximize the service that they're delivering. So that's just an example of it.
Mr. Alexander.
So 57 years now, leaving the Queen out of it, 57 years now, we have no information about what this country is naturally predisposed to. Yet we lead the world. We lead planet Earth. Carolyn C. Prasad Bechan was in government. Mariano Brown was in government. We lead the entire globe in many things. We don't know what our natural predisposition is. I ignored each of them saying the word transformation. And I have not used it. I'm going to talk about it now. How could you transform if you have no idea what you want to transform to? And 57 years later, without understanding all the things that are intrinsically Trinidadian and Tobagonian, we're looking for data. I'm not knocking you. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking. I'm saying that should have been a natural byproduct of governance. We have a central statistical office. What's its job? The Auditor General's report and the Central Statistical Office will give anybody enough information as to be able to tell you where we've gone wrong. Trinidad and Tobago has ways and means that it could be maximized and taken to its full potential. We've not done it. We've killed Carnival. We've killed it. There's no viewers for Carnival. Nobody wants to come here for our Carnival. Besides some returning Trinis with a heartbreak for Trinidad and Tobago, nobody coming here. Millions of people go to see a cathedral in Spain and nothing here nobody want to come to. So before we talk about room stocks, what you bringing them to? The reef that the fishermen killing in Tobago? Dragging the anchors across the reef. 57 years of government. They know this. But it will take 15 years of planning and 100 million years of execution to stop, to build a floating jetty for the fishermen to park up and stop destroying the Boko Reef. We had the largest brain coral in the world. Do we still? We are the only nation on the planet that has a nylon pool. If the Bahamas or Bermuda had that, it would be on the front page of every magazine. We don't know what to do with it. We have no idea what to do with the pitch lake. We give it to the Queen, we give it to the Chinese. We stand up on the side of the road like prostitutes begging, look, you want some pitch? Because we don't know. 57 years of government, there's been nothing downstream. One minister of planning, who is a geologist, who is now a prime minister, tried to build an industrial park inside the pitch. But besides that madness, we don't know what to do with it. We've elected charlatans and pretenders to office. And let's be honest, the problem wasn't the maxi. The problem was the drivers. We've had failures of government. When the People's Partnership government came out of office, they counted box drains. They counted police stations. Nothing changed. The healthcare sector was still failing. The education sector was still failing. We build schools, but education is a mess. And the whole world tell them SCA is nonsense. Trinidad and Tobago has been mismanaged by government for 57 years. And if that is my last contribution today, that is the problem. And to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, wake up now and hear all the deferrals and the double speak, and start to elect people to office who bring it to you as straightforward as possible, who are willing to engage you, to decentralize government away from one central location and put it in the 41 constituencies so that the actual people could once again have a say in how their country is run.
So now that we have identified where we went wrong, and this is what this discussion is about. And I'm glad you're bringing that up, and I'm glad for everything that is coming out and sharing. So now that we've identified where we went wrong, now how do we go forward? How do we make because at the end of the day, what we want for ourselves, and what we want for our country, not to make it a better place.
If you have people that have failed you time and time again, no version of the PNM has been a benefit to this country. No version of the UNC. Some of their supporters may have benefited. Some people may have gotten a road or a street light. I understand that. The government is more than that. Besides the provision of basic goods and services, which they should have been held to nationally, the government was supposed to be able to take all these windfalls that we got and use it to direct this country and take it forward into multiples of streams of diversification. The Middle East started that in the 80s when the world realized that you cannot rely on oil and gas.
Yeah.
So to have the same conversations about should it be $3, should it be $2, is he overestimating at 57 or 60?
No, that's not the
We've
discussion we're
been,
having
no,
today.
not you, not here. But that is when you hear the economists talk, that's where the conversation starts. We still talking about oil and gas as if the vicissitudes of the oil and gas industry is supposed to dictate how the average person lives in this country.
All right. So let's say that you were the Prime Minister of the country. What would the top 3 things you would be listing in the budget to put out there for diversification? When we talk about diversification away from oil and gas.
The top 3 things in the budget should have been jobs, jobs, and jobs. If we develop the economy, if we opened it up, I listened to the Prime Minister talk about the banking sector. Mm-hmm. The banking sector in this country is raping the country. We have no regulations of any value. People put their money in banks and get no interest on it. Because the banks no longer have to pay interest on depositors' funds, there is no available credit to the average person, no risk. The banks don't have to take risks anymore. Now they're in money warehousing. So it's $45 to cash a check. And every month you hear a different bank put out their different latest charges. Banking in the country is no longer put your retirement funds in the account and let it double. Now you put your retirement funds in the account and let it dwindle. And that is just that. He should have opened the market. Instead of opening the market to competition, he gave the credit unions banking powers. We're heading dangerously close to what caused the bubble in the United States in 2008, where we're trying to create out of functional organizations. Credit unions serve a purpose. What we need is more vibrancy in the banking sector so that the actual public will get more for their money.
Well, yes, you're talking about jobs.
But yeah.
How are you creating the jobs? What are you going to do? What would you have put on the budget to create jobs?
The money that we've spent under the People's Partnership alone could have created where the
What are you going to do now to create jobs?
I am answering you. We could have been doing foreign direct partnerships in Trinidad and Tobago, inviting companies here in labor-intensive businesses. It's a start and it's cash flow. We could have created duty-free economic zones here. We talk it, but we've never done it, and it's not just oil and gas.
But you just heard economic zones
we should
in the
have
budget
talked. We should have
yesterday.
talked. Carolyn, I've heard it every year.
Exactly. So it's the
I have not seen
implementation.
anything done. I have seen them build E-Tech Park in Wallafield to attract IT, and not one company comes. Not one. $100 million spent. So what was in the plan? that took all the years to say, let's build that. If you go to all the major manufacturers in the world and manufacture things that are distributed in North, Central, and South America and to the Caribbean, shipping should be an issue here. We should be a major shipping hub. With the Panama Canal, we are located outside of the hurricane belt. We could be using Trinidad and Tobago right now as a transshipment point for things other than drugs. That would create jobs. The marine craft, I proposed a marine university in 2015 when I ran as an independent. Instead of giving Chagaramas a water park, you could have given Chagaramas a marine university. Trinidad and Tobago is supposed to be the #1 repository of all those pleasure craft that get damaged in the hurricanes. There are plenty ways to create jobs. Diversification away from oil and gas.
You see, we have
is the way.
overused the term diversification, and this is why the term transformation is being used today. If you are going to create, because the biggest problem we have is jobs. That's our biggest problem. And how are we creating the new jobs? And it's not just creating jobs, because this is what I keep hearing. You know, create jobs for the CPEP or create for the minimum wage. I'm talking about the many people who come out of all our tertiary education institutes. Somebody was talking about vocational skills. Why are we not able to absorb all these new skill sets? And that is because we have not modernized the economy to create those spaces for those new jobs that we're talking about. And I gave an example of the public service of Trinidad and Tobago, where I was saying, if you look at the jobs, we have not created new systems and processes to be able to create opportunities for the new jobs, the people who are coming out of University of the West Indies. If you go to the police service, that's why I gave the example. There's so many new areas which we require to transform it. But by not putting it in place, we're not creating the opportunities to absorb those new people who educate themselves and can't find jobs. That's the point I'm making. I can go even to the whole, and again too, it's because of implementation, continuity. If I come back, yesterday they spoke about energy efficiency. But that was a project that was started in 2010. We passed a whole set of incentives to be able to create that new industry, because we recognize that that is an industry that Trinidad and Tobago could have led in and become the pilot for the Caribbean. In fact, we became the Renewable Energy Center, Research Center for Trinidad, for the region right here. So my point is, 9 years later, we're back to the same point about trying to create this new industry, trying to create these new jobs. In fact, all those, what we call ESOs, which were created as new job spec, Talokja created a whole new program to educate these people and certify them. They have all been certified, but they really did not find jobs here in Trinidad and Tobago. To create it, to create the demand, we said let all public service buildings become energy efficient. Make sure that they have to be audited energy-wise so that you create the use, the demand for these people. That did not happen. It did not continue. Today, we're back to the same point of saying let us redesign public offices to be able to comply with those new
That
standards.
doesn't sound a little bit like the cart before the horse, do you know? Creating use after the fact. We've certified people and stuff that we had no need for.
Because we started the industry, the plans, you have to do
At
it.
the end.
No, we did the plan in 2010. And what I'm saying is that in 2010, okay, to be able to fulfill the needs of this new industry, you need these skill sets. Obviously now you have to start up a program to train, to develop these new skill sets required for that industry and for this particular type of professional. And in fact, these professionals, they went through the program and some of them are now employed in the region because Trinidad and Tobago has fell behind by failure to continue the program in 2010, 2011, right up to 2019. The other countries in the Caribbean have taken the front and we have left behind. That's
the
the
medical
point.
students with the
That's
scholarships who became doctors and couldn't get jobs in Trinidad.
And again
so we
too-
had to lose the scholarship money and they go out.
And why? Why? Because the same thing again, we failed to put a system, and I was accused when Minister Garcia said that I was giving too many scholarships to medical students. And it was because if you create the system where those who are in the system can move up and specialize, then there will be space for the new doctors coming in. And those who specialize, not to say we don't need it, because now we're importing from Cuba. We're importing from everywhere else, and foreign exchange is going on. But had we done that, these people, locals, would have been deployed in those positions because healthcare is expanding. We want to go into health tourism. And it's a wide range, it's a spectrum. And not only that, but the associated skills as well. So that's my point about going forward for creating those jobs. The solution to it is how we create those new spaces. You start with the plan, you create those spaces, and then you develop the demand for those skill
If I
sets.
could just say one thing, Karen, I have been somebody who has thought you to be a brilliant person. I have nothing but respect for Mariano Brown and his abilities. I think that the technocrats and the capable people in this country have been kept back by a lack of vision. And I think that that is where we all need to start this conversation over. Where we actually trying to go as a nation.
That is the point of today's
Discussion,
conversation.
and that's what we're
I
saying.
I think
But you're gonna have to happen
I think
about
what
10 times.
what we did so far is we looked back at what
That's
what was
right.
done
You have to
and the
look
problems, and
future.
we kind of reiterated the many problems,
Of the
and that's a typical political setting, and that's what I was refraining from. But it's done. What we've done is establish it when we've
But
established the
you've
problems.
identified
And
here today all of the things that actually retard development. You had to have this conversation.
yes,
Because we're changing the name from diversification to transformation, and I like that. Because I'm sure we're gonna have to change the name again, because we're doing nothing with it, and that's all I'm saying. And there has to be a reason why. And all I want to keep asking is why. Why do we fail? Why is it failing? Why is a country this rich, this wealthy, this pregnant with so many capable and talented people at the point where we're talking about a budget high point is 30 cents US
Yeah.
minimum wage increase to 194,000 people, 20% of our adult workforce.
Yeah.
That is an insanity.
now, as much as I am enjoying this conversation, and I'm sure all of you are, all of our viewers, we are slowly running out of time. So I'm going to ask Mr. Mariano Brown your closing comments once again as we wrap things up finally for today.
Well, I think the previous program I had said, the previous segment of this program I indicated, one of the things we need to concentrate on was efficiency in the use of our funds. Right? And that means coordination and harmonization. I'll make that point again.
Yeah.
Mrs. Ipasade.
I think that it is not how much we are spending, it's how we are spending it. And I always say the expenditure pattern for the last 5 years is supposed to dictate us the strategy for going forward to creating that new future. We must understand the globe has changed, the world has changed, and Trinidad and Tobago has to change as well. We need to create that new 21st century future for Trinidad and Tobago, which will end up deploying all these young people who are well educated in modern skill sets, and that will be able to employ them going forward. Every person in Trinidad and Tobago, I believe, instead of, and this is why I come back to that term, reform, instead of saying that we want to spend money on highways to deal with a traffic problem at 8 in the morning and 4 p.m., probably that money, that expenditure, could have been spent in modernizing a public service to give us the ease of doing business so we get investors and we're able to employ more people who could pay taxes so that you can improve the revenue streams for the government of Trinidad and Tobago.
Mr. Alexander, your closing comments.
I just want to finish on what she just said there. That highway is as a net result of us failing to decentralize away from the 200,000 people that has to drive into and out of Port of Spain every day to function in government offices that could have been located in Point 14, Sangre Grande and Toco.
Using technology.
And what couldn't go on the cloud and what couldn't go digital. I still believe that Trinidad and Tobago has the greatest potential to be one of the most beautiful countries in the world to live in. I think our problems can be solved. We as a people just need to stop voting race, stop thinking that we have no other options but the nonsense of racist voting, and start voting for people who are bringing the conversation back to issues, policies, programs that would actually transform the nation.
Mr. Anderson.
I believe we need a greater appreciation of the scientific method. And but I just want to share something briefly. In doing some of my studies, I was able to track a trend that I noticed, that a lot of the progress that was pushed in Trinidad and Tobago came from entrepreneurs and not the public sector. So I believe that entrepreneurs will actually push development and push transformation in Trinidad and Tobago, and when it catches on, then the government will finally get that aha moment and catch up. it wouldn't come from government.
All right. So definitely, what we've seen here today is a very diverse bunch of consultants. We've seen politicians. We've seen students. But the bottom line is we're all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and the aim of this conversation is to push a way forward for what we call a beautiful home, a beautiful Trinidad and Tobago. That's all from me and our team here at PSA TV. I'm Christy Kali saying, have a good day.